Lieutenant Sam Laser served on the USS Yorktown in World War II. He and his ship saw action at the Battle of the Coral Sea, and most famously during the turning point of the war in the Pacific Theater, the Battle of Midway. But his timing for enlisting in active duty could not have been more providential.
I wanted to enlist. We were near enough, I felt, to war that I wanted to go and enlist. I felt as if it's going to start any time. And my timing was real good. I reported aboard the Yorktown about 2000 hours on December the 6th, 1941. We sailed to Pearl Harbor and got there on the 6th day of February, 42. And as you go up the channel there and get up by Battleship Row, you know, it was just unbelievable, the devastation that the Japs had wrought on at Pearl Harbor. All the battleships were sunk or inoperable, and some other smaller ships. But fortunately, the 3 aircraft carriers that were available to the South Pacific at that time did not happen to be there. We set out from Pearl Harbor near the end of May, probably May 29th to 30th. I think later it was Buckmaster that told us that we were going to a little skirmish, was the way he phrased it. You're on your way to a little skirmish at Midway, after which we're going to Bremerton, Washington, and you'll get a lot of leave, and made us very happy there. So we didn't know what we were getting into when he said, you're going to a little skirmish at Midway. We learned later, didn't know this at the time, we learned later that the Japanese had over 100 surface ships coming down at us, and that we were terribly outmanned. They had, for example, 11 battleships, we had none. They had 8 aircraft carriers, we had 3. They had more cruisers and destroyers than we did. So when the Midway battle started on the morning of June 4th, 1942, each side knew where the others were. We had a pretty good grasp of where they were, not precisely, but almost. We had a little bit of advantage. We had radar, and the Japanese didn't have it by then. Now, radar wasn't good for over 70, 75 miles, maybe, something like that, but we could pick up those blips. We knew the airplanes were coming at us a few minutes at least before they got there. The Japanese didn't have that benefit or advantage. The Torpedo Squadron 8 off the Hornet was the first squadron to find the 3 carriers. And they went in shortly thereafter with the other torpedo planes. When the torpedo planes, who are just, 100 feet or 2 above the water, are flying in toward the Japanese carriers, the Zero fighter planes from the Japanese ships, who are protecting those ships in what's called carrier air patrol, come down, and these torpedo planes are their easy prey. These big old torpedo planes that we were flying were called a TBD Devastator, with 2,000 pound torpedoes on them. They couldn't fly over 90 knots. They couldn't maneuver because they got to get on a course to drop the torpedo at the time they think is propitious. Not a torpedo hit any of the Japanese from Torpedo 8. All of them were shot down. 1 man lived, George Gay. Now, their sacrifice wasn't in vain, because when we did then, a few minutes later, find those 3 Japanese carriers with our dive bombers, they had direct flight, direct run. They had an easy, so to speak, run. They only had to be worried about the anti-aircraft fire from the ships, which is tremendous, but didn't have those Zeros trying to shoot them down before they got there and diverting them. So we had a number now, lots of I imagine there were 30, 40 SPDs, Douglas Dauntless dive bombers, found those 3 carriers. When our bombs hit their flight decks, there were airplanes there, there were thousands of, hundreds of gallons of gasoline there was ordnance all under those airplanes. It just blew up. And they put them out of commission. It's referred to as the famous 4 minutes. I think it's probably more like 5 or 6. But in 4 to 6 minutes, our bombers had hit those 3 carriers with such devastation that they were they could no longer operate. The remaining ship, aircraft carrier called the Hiryu, H-I-R-Y-U, was not detected at that point, hadn't been found. And one of the well-known admirals, Admiral Yamaguchi, was in charge over there, and he saw our planes going back and very wisely and simply had his air group getting well behind them, but followed them. He knew they had to go back to some aircraft carrier. And ours was the aircraft carrier they found. The Hornet and the Enterprise, who did great jobs offensively, never had to defend their ships. Every bomb, every torpedo, all the strafing that took place was directed at the Yorktown. So about noon that day, here comes, say 25, 27, maybe 30 dive bombers. Only about 7 got through to drop bombs. Now, I don't think any of those 7 got away. I think we probably shot them, but too late. They dropped their bombs before we knocked them out. And of those 7 bombers, at least 3 of them hit us. We received 3 bomb hits this time. One of them was up in the forward part of the ship, which again, the bomb went down below decks, blew up, did some damage, and killed some men. Another one hit back at the after end of the island structure where these 1.1 gun mounts are, and just wiped that gun mount, almost 2 of those gun mount crews out with the shrapnel. It was a demolition bomb. It blew off instantaneously and throws shrapnel everywhere, and it's a personnel bomb. It kills people. And my battle station was called Sky Control. It's a small platform right up in the very top of the ship, right under the radar mast, about 12, 14 feet long, 8, 10 feet wide, and we had 250 caliber machine guns up there. We were literally the highest men on the ship. We were 126 feet above the waterline, roughly. The 3rd bomb came in right beside me, just right down. I honestly had the thought that the thing's gonna just come in, hit me on the head. All the thousands of miles out there of ocean, square miles, this thing is gonna just drop on this little platform. But it went beside us, went at an angle from port to starboard, and went right near the island structure and went right down into the boiler room. Strategically, the worst place we could get a hit. It blew out all the fires. So we were literally, in a few minutes, we were dead in the water.
With the USS Yorktown a virtual sitting duck, Sam's Japanese attackers launched 2 deadly accurate torpedoes.
Those 2 torpedoes were so powerful that it was as if a dog were shaking a rat in his teeth. It shook the whole ship, actually lifted the propellers, we call them the screws, up out of the water. You can't imagine that that the torpedoes had that kind of power built in them. We were flying a huge battle flag that day at Midway, and some of that shrapnel is so strong it came up from the right at the edge, the water line at the edge of the ship, and we've had some shrapnel holes that went through the flag way up there. And even the outside blast was so much that one man who had a 30 caliber machine gun down on the catwalk rail, it must have blown him 60, 75 feet up, 100 feet in the air with his hand still on that gun, because he came almost right in my line of fire. No humanitarian motive entered my mind at that time. I wanted to do what I could to kill all of them, just as they were trying to kill us. If you haven't been in mortal combat, you don't really know what that feels like. I mean, you're killing people and people are trying to kill you. That's not child's play, that's war.
With the Yorktown suffering so much devastation, the skipper gave orders to abandon ship.
We had a lot of wounded men to get off there and try to get them in life rafts and get over to other ships. And of course, some of them were dying right then, some of them were praying, some yelling, what's going to happen to me? And it's just not a good situation. It's just a very terrible thing to see men, your friends, have to endure that. Probably the best friend I had on the ship was a young man named Tony Canzoneri, from an Italian from Bessemer, Alabama. Tony had gone to Southwestern in Memphis, which was pretty close to Little Rock, so we became good friends. And Tony was a big man. He had played football over there. He probably weighed 210, 220, and back then, that's a big man. When I was at university in '46, after the war, there weren't one or two 200-pound men on a football team. The skipper ordered to abandon the ship because it listed 26, 28 degrees in a minute. He thought it was in the act to capsize it. He thought the ship was going to capsize, literally, when he ordered to abandon ship. So you go over to the right side, starboard side, to get off. Well, it's high. Now, they give you some big lines. They tie lines on the side of the ship, great big rope, probably 6, 8 inches in diameter, and you climb down that as best you can till you get maybe 20, 25 feet above the waterline. The rope ends there, and then you turn around toward the water, put your feet up against the bulkhead, and dive into the water. Well, there's a lot of oil out there, and some fire, but mostly oil. I learned I could swim underwater far enough. I came up beyond the oil. Tony came up in the oil and got very ill at his stomach.
Sam reluctantly admitted that he swam back into the oil to pull Tony to safety. The two men drifted in the water for hours waiting for rescue and wondering which way the tides of war were turning.
Here I am, swimming out in the ocean. Our ship is sunk. It looks to me as if, maybe we're getting whipped. I don't know what's happening to the other ships. That you're kind of depressed because you think we're not doing well. I didn't learn until later that what we had done there, sinking those 3 ships immediately almost, and the later on that afternoon, catching the Hire-U and putting it out of commission, that we had literally turned the tide of the war. Midway was the first time in over 200 years the Japanese fleet had suffered a loss, suffered a defeat at sea. They just had centuries of victories.
It may have seemed like centuries, but finally, after hours afloat, Sam and Tony were rescued by an American destroyer.
The USS Benham, B-E-N-H-A-M, I'll never forget that name, and brought us aboard. And we spent that night sleeping, as best I remember, we slept, they picked up quite a few other guys. We slept under a 3-inch gun turret, right on a steel deck, and just delighted to be there.
58 years later, memories of the Battle of Midway and the sinking of the Yorktown reveal the scars of war.
It brings back some of the horror, some of the pain, some of the suffering. A lot of men who never got to see their mother and dad again. A lot of men whose little children never got to see them again. And people don't think of that. And that ship was very important to me. I named my youngest son Samuel York, later for the Yorktown. I got pride in that ship. Well, of course, you feel proud to have been some little part of something that did make some history. It's just always been regarded as one of the great naval battles of all time because it did turn the course of the war in the Pacific. And it was a great battle, and to me, a battle is only historically declared a great battle if one or two things occur. If you turn the tide of the battle, as we did, or if it's really, I guess, what you call the triumph of human spirit over great adversity. When you can, we weren't supposed to win the war. On any kind of logic and the shipping they had, the manpower they had, we weren't supposed to win that war. But the men did it. We won the war. A great sacrifice. We lost lots of brave pilots, lots of airplanes, lots of brave men. Up to upwards of 400,000 young men gave their lives in World War II. And I don't know how many hundreds of thousands were injured, were casualties. Some of them still casualties today. And that's sacrifice. Those men, what more can you ask of a man than to willingly give his life for God or country or a cause? We need to have a mission, like we had a mission to fight. We need to have a mission to educate people. Let them understand what freedom is and what freedom and liberty and duty mean.
Freedom, liberty, and duty are important words with special meanings to this survivor, Lieutenant Sam Laser. because of the men who didn't survive.
The guys who really do something that they think may well kill them, and they go right on. The men who do the inordinate, ultimate acts of bravery under combat, who literally, knowing they're going to be killed, are shooting down as many as they can before they die. They're men who take these hills in these battles. The men at Normandy, we lost 5,200 men, I think it was, on Normandy alone. Those guys are in hand-to-hand combat almost. Men who assume a terrible risk in the hope or anticipation of saving one or more lives, and they succeed. Now those guys are heroes. I'm a survivor. I made it through. I survived, luckily, I guess. To some extent, you promote some self-promotion of that survivorship. You do what's required of you to stay alive. I could have screwed up somewhere, messed up, and might not have been here or been here as a whole person, hopefully. But yes, I'm a survivor. I made it through.